Hello everyone and welcome back to the Artificial DM. So first off, I really quickly want to give you guys a huge shout out. All of you awesome subscribers. We just reached our first 1,000 subscribers. It's a huge milestone and I honestly was not expecting to see so much support from all of you wonderful viewers. And honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I really do appreciate all of you who enjoy. Even those that only stop by for a moment and decide not to subscribe, but still watch the video. It means a ton to me. For today, we've only got one story, but it's a pretty good one, and you'll see. In RPG Horror Stories. This story is from Sir Tassi. Jack Black, the Bard, successfully instigates a genocidal communist uprising in my campaign. This is a tale from the game Dungeon World, the love letter to D&D, as its creator once called it himself. It's important to note this, because Dungeon World is the perfect game to run when your party tends to go off the rails quite a bit. It never presumes players' actions, and it gives the tools to the GM to adapt the game on the fly, with barely any effort. And yet, this is the tale of a player who managed to derail the game in a way that the party had to be ham-fistedly extracted to another continent because they managed to draw the ire of an entire kingdom upon themselves within the first 3 of our 4 sessions. If I managed to pique your interest, then please do read on. It all started with Session 0. I volunteered to GM because I just recently got into the hobby, and Dungeon World is the game you want to learn GMing from. We gathered on our favorite online tabletop RPG platform and started creating characters. There was Dan, playing a clever, functioning sociopath of a thief, to whom caring about number 1 came before anything else, and who was ever chasing the thrill of the heist. Then we had George, deciding on playing an ancient warrior who fell for a time warping trap and ended up being rescued by the party in their first dungeon, and upon his release, he wanted to find his descendants. The third player, Zach, decided to grab a cliche-as-hell elven ranger with his trusty bear companion, simply going where adventures take him. And then came Gabe. Gabe was always the guy who loved playing outlier characters. If we played in a nondescript sci-fi setting, he wanted to be a space Viking with a sword that transforms into a sniper rifle. In Star Wars, he wanted to bring his GMPC, who was a Borg-like android with a lightsaber built into one of his hands. And now that we've decided to roll with a medieval fantasy-ass setting, he was determined to bring a bard named Gabe Black. It also just happened that his character bore an uncanny resemblance to our world's Jack Black, and his personal goal was to obtain the legendary magic item, the Pick of Destiny. I didn't see a problem with this, to be honest. He seemed to be a fun little addition to the group, and a possible source of comedic relief. Little did I know that he was planning to play this game as an actual Jack Black movie. Now, if you have never seen any of these films before, or rather, if you are unwilling to ever admit that you have, these movies follow one simple plot. Jack Black is cringy and awesome, does stuff mostly related to metal, and drags an arbitrary number of background characters with him along the way. I genuinely did not see this coming, however, but I'm sure that now anyone who's reading this can see with absolute clarity where the story is heading. So, here we go. We take off, and the first session goes pretty well. After the dungeon, they arrived in a quarry town. I described to them the town that was built around a giant quarry, who would have thought, which has recently been turned into a gulag for the infected because there's a mysterious disease rampant among the populace. I also established the presence of a gang of thugs named the Blue Scarfs, and visible signs of class disparity between the humans and non-humans, the latter living in obviously better conditions. I ask each of them what they want to do in town. Zach says his ranger wants to look for a temple because he's planning to cut in on the cleric's business. George's fighter heads straight into the slums to find the guy who might have his fighter's signature weapon, which he used as a throwing weapon last night, and actually, genuinely, forgot to recover. Dan's thief taps out. Mind you, Dan is pretty good at separating the character from the real person. He just reasons that his thief would not stay too long around these oafs who act more on impulse than reason, which resulted in some tension between the characters in and after the dungeon. Fair enough. Gabe also has a simple but entertaining idea of his own. He accompanies the fighter, hoping to maybe stumble upon the Pick of Destiny on accident, but during their walk, he realizes something. The Pick of Destiny is a teeny tiny artifact, and there's an awful lot of ground to cover. He'll need some extra pairs of hands to help him search for the damn thing. He'll need a lot of those, in fact. I'm diligently taking notes because this could be an intermediate goal for the bard on the way of finding the Pick of Destiny. This could be a series of adventures itself. Becoming a well-respected leader, amassing a bunch of followers. How interesting. Gabe, however, has other plans. He arranges for a meeting with the Blue Scarves, and with some pretty spot-on parlay rolls, he convinces them to join him in storming the mayor's mansion when he gives the signal. Uh-oh. He then heads to the main square and stands up on a stack of crates. He starts gathering people around him, humans mostly. He starts riling up the people with a passionate speech about how the working class, the humans, are oppressed by the bourgeois, elven, and dwarven overlords. How the mayor, also a human, sells them, his own kin, to these leeches for luxuries. Uh-oh. I feel that the town guard should step in at this point, but I made the mistake to establish that most of them are humans as well. Some of them even join the audience and cheers Gabe's speech, but about half of them retains their discipline. They see where this is going, and start preparing for the defense around the mayor's mansion. All the while, Gabe announces that this is the first day of the glorious workers' revolution, and urges everyone to tear down the bourgeoisie and take back what's theirs. At this point, it's a very real possibility that he might lose the people's attention to the barely held back rage he inspired in them, so I make him roll to avoid that, which he fails. George's fighter, who agreed to play muscle for Gabe to discourage the guard from arresting them, watches with growing concern as the angry mob starts heading towards the non-human district. While this is happening, Zach's ranger meets Dan's new character in the temple. They have a short discussion about spirituality. Dan's paladin discusses with Zach's character how he's on something like a pilgrimage to find ever-growing challenges and grow by overcoming them. So shortly after, he decides to accept Zach's invitation to the adventuring party. On their way back to the rendezvous point they agreed on, they cannot avoid noticing the ensuing chaos. When they arrive, it's already full-blown ethnic cleansing on the streets, in broad daylight. Almost all of my key NPCs are also non-human, but I guess that doesn't really matter anymore. I crumple up my notes I made about possible plotlines and adventure hooks, and throw them in the bin. Elves and dwarves are being murdered by the dozens. Looting and pillaging and arson is everywhere. Somehow the ranger and the paladin manage to avoid getting the crap beaten out of them and catch up with George and Gabe, whose character is apparently now First Comrade Black. After a short discussion about what's going on, both the paladin and the ranger decide to help the other two. Not, of course, from the goodness of their hearts, but rather because both of them are non-humans, and given the choice between either helping the bard to clean up the situation and part ways afterwards, or trying to fight their way through an entire town of genocidal communists, well, it's not much of a choice, really. They spend a good few hours corralling the revolutionaries so that their First Comrade Black can persuade them to, as a final act of defiance, storm the mayor's mansion and bring him to justice. They arrive at the mansion to find it fortified by the remaining loyalists. One hell of a fight breaks loose on the main square, and the scales are tipping towards the rebels. I inform the party that the loyalists are falling back, and the party can catch a glimpse of the mayor being evacuated. Lucky for us, Gabe's bard also has a contingency plan for this scenario. He remotely charms one of the guards to murderate the mayor in his carriage. The mayor's dead. All the key NPCs for my campaign are dead. Half of the town is pillaged and burnt down. Commies have taken over. Commies have taken over. Oh, and then they decide to open up the quarantine area down in the old quarry and let out the infected because, lol. When I accept that everything I planned for them just went up in flames, they graciously decide that they will descend into the dungeon I planned out for them to explore. Oh boy! Oh boy, oh boy. What joy! Except 20 minutes in-game time later, First Comrade Black meets his end by the hands of some fire beetles, because it turns out you cannot solve literally everything by preaching about communism. Or maybe these were just some fiercely capitalistic fire beetles. We never found out. We also lose George's fighter, so he rolls up a wizard and they leave town after exiting the dungeon. I let them know that the big bad evil guy also managed to escape the dungeon. I'm also kind of proud of this. He was a changeling, so he didn't have to engage in any suspicious GM shenanigans to extract him. I secretly told George to keep playing his now dead fighter character, but with the twist that he doesn't have any memories before the dungeon. Oh, and also, try to secretly murder the party every now and then. Attaboy! So yeah, the big bad evil guy just walked out with them. This is still salvageable, I think to myself. This is nothing like the adventure I planned for them, but now the main instigator character is dead. George also has a new character. Dan's paladin did literally nothing wrong during the uprising, and Zach's ranger can simply claim that he's just the victim of the pogroms and escaped. I'll make Gabe roll up a new character. It's going to be fine. Next session, we start by the party arriving at a nearby village, hot on the heels of the changeling big bad evil guy. We rolled up Gabe's new character, an edgelord lawful fallen angel. I felt he wanted to overcompensate a bit, almost as if he felt kind of ashamed that he completely flooped over all my plans for the campaign, and wanted to bring a character that can easily be motivated to do the right thing. Oh boy, was I wrong again. They arrive in the village and start snooping around. I have some village kids making fun of the wizard, because his thing was that he was hideously ugly. Like, minced meat face ugly. So the kids surround him and make fun of him. Which Gabe's character notices. He walks over there and tells the children to stop and demand them to point him in the direction of their parents. A minute or so later, he finds the humble turnip farmers and informs them about their kids being insufferable little runts. They apologize. All's well that ends well, right?
That's not going to be enough, I'm afraid,
Gabe says. Oh no. Oh, for floop's sake, Gabe, no!
For the wages of sin is death. Fear not, though. It would also be a sin to hurt innocent children.
He then promptly hacks the parents into flooping pieces. A moment of silence commences, after which I inform them that the villagers are quite certain in their ability to overwhelm 4 meager vagabonds. So everyone runs home, and a few minutes later they gang up, armed with pitchforks, scythes, and torches. Combat erupts. The adventurers are fighting an uphill battle, but in the end they manage to murder enough villagers to make the others flee.
I'll chase them down! They attacked me, the envoy of God! Thus they are all sinners! And for the wages of sin...
I hear Gabe starting again, but Zach interjects.
I'll not help you. While you are chasing down the villagers, I take my leave.
Gabe says that his character will run down the remaining peasants, one by one, down to the last one. He'll let none survive. I inform him that it's a practical impossibility, especially since the others are not helping him do that, and I end the session there. The next day, I politely asked him not to play with us anymore. That was the first time ever I worked up the courage to directly confront one of my players. In retrospect, I could have talked this over with him, and directly expressed my problems with his playstyle. Try to compromise. But again, I was new to the hobby, and at that point, I had enough. Not only he threw every chance for an adventure into the wind in favor of possible murder hoboing, he did it in a way that got dirt on the other player characters as well, who were clearly not on board with this. He took it surprisingly well, in a very mature way, and I guess that's the moral of the story. If you feel that something's fishy in the group, then don't be afraid to confront your players in a mature way. When it comes to this story, the DM was willing to give the players a full experience of the game and allow them to take it in their own hands, which can be a good aspect. However, I feel like he gave the players the keys to the cars and then hopped into the trunk and said, "Take me wherever," because Gabe just took the campaign and ran away with it. And there are parts to that were salvageable, as the DM said, but at that point they needed to have a discussion about derailing the campaign or finding a way to meet a happy medium of a sandbox game while still giving the DM plot points to put in, if that makes sense. Let me know what you would do if you were in this situation down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, and if you want to hear more stories just like this, then hit the subscribe button. Until next time, hope you feel inspired.